Ruth Asawa legacy. In the hallowed halls of modern art, certain names echo with the weight of established history. But sometimes, the most profound revolutions happen quietly, woven thread by thread, until the world is forced to catch up. Right now, two of the world's most prestigious institutions, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and New York's Museum of Modern Art, are staging monumental retrospectives dedicated to one such quiet revolutionary, Ruth Asawa. This dual recognition isn't just an exhibition, it's a coronation. It's the art world officially acknowledging a truth that has been simmering for decades, that Ruth Asawa was not just a sculptor, but a pivotal figure who fundamentally reshaped our understanding of form, space, and the very purpose of art. To understand the power of her work, to feel the weightless grace of her intricate wire sculptures, you first have to understand the incredible weight of the world she had to push against. Her story is one of profound resilience, a journey that begins not in a pristine art school studio, but in the dust and discrimination of pre-war America. Born in 1926 in Norwalk, California, Asawa was one of 7 children born to Japanese immigrant parents who worked as truck farmers. Her early life was one of hard labor, rising before dawn to work the fields, her hands already learning the language of patient, repetitive tasks. This was a life dictated by the seasons and the soil, a world away from the abstract theories of modern art. But that world was violently upended in 1942. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Asawa family, along with 120,000 other Japanese Americans, were victims of one of the most shameful chapters in American history. They were forcibly removed from their homes and incarcerated in internment camps. Ruth, just a teenager, was first sent to the Santa Anita Assembly Center in California, a temporary detention facility set up at a racetrack where her family lived in horse stalls. It was here, amidst the profound injustice and uncertainty, that the first seeds of her artistic future were paradoxically sown. In a strange twist of fate, several professional artists were also among the internees, including animators from Walt Disney Studios. They began offering art classes to pass the time and maintain a sense of humanity. It was here that a young Ruth Asawa learned to draw, her talent immediately apparent. This was more than a hobby. It was a lifeline, a way to process the incomprehensible, a tool to create order and beauty in a world of chaos. From Santa Anita, her family was moved to the Rower War Relocation Center in Arkansas. The experience of internment was deeply scarring, a lesson in the fragility of freedom and the pain of being seen as other in her own country. Yet, Asawa's creative spirit refused to be extinguished. She graduated high school from within the camp's barbed wire fences and, with the help of a scholarship from the Religious Society of Friends, was able to leave Rower to attend Milwaukee State Teachers College, intending to become an art teacher. However, the shadow of prejudice followed her. She was told that due to lingering anti-Japanese sentiment, no school in the state of Wisconsin would hire her to teach. Her dream was deferred, her path blocked once again. But this roadblock would lead to the single most important detour of her artistic life. Advised by friends, she used her remaining scholarship money to enroll in a summer program at a place that was less a college and more a radical experiment in living and learning, Black Mountain College in North Carolina. From 1946 to 1949, Black Mountain was Asawa's crucible. It was an unaccredited, utopian community where the lines between student and teacher, art and life were completely dissolved. The faculty was a staggering collection of avant-garde geniuses who had fled Europe or been ostracized by mainstream academia. Here, she studied under the painter Joseph Albers, the legendary Bauhaus instructor who taught her to see the world in terms of form, color, and material, urging his students to create something from nothing using found objects like paper, leaves, and rocks. She took dance classes with Merce Cunningham and absorbed the revolutionary ideas of composer John Cage and the visionary architect Buckminster Fuller. Black Mountain was not about career training. It was about rewiring your brain to think creatively, to solve problems, and to see the interconnectedness of all things. It was a philosophy that would define Asawa for the rest of her life. It was here that she shed the idea of becoming a conventional artist and instead embraced a holistic vision of creativity as a fundamental part of existence. It was also during a trip to Toluca, Mexico in 1947 with Albers that she had her eureka moment. She saw local villagers using a simple looping technique with wire to create baskets for eggs and other goods. She was mesmerized. It was a technique that was functional, beautiful, and accessible. It connected directly to the lessons of Albers to make art from humble materials, and it resonated with the repetitive, meditative handiwork she had known since childhood. She began to experiment, trading the pencil for wire, and started to quite literally draw in space. The first looped wire sculptures were born from this synthesis of experiences: the patience of farm labor, the injustice of internment, the radical pedagogy of Black Mountain, and the simple genius of a Mexican basket weaver. These were not sculptures in the traditional sense, heavy, solid objects that displaced space. They were the opposite. They were transparent, weightless forms that captured and defined space, challenging the very definition of what a sculpture could be. They were a testament to her unconventional path, a legacy forged not in spite of adversity, but directly because of it. Block 2. Asawa Art Techniques. Ruth Asawa's sculptures are immediately recognizable, yet they defy easy categorization. They feel both ancient and futuristic, biological and architectural, simple and infinitely complex. To truly appreciate their revolutionary nature, we have to delve into her unique artistic philosophy and the innovative techniques that brought them to life. It all begins with the material. Asawa chose something profoundly ordinary: industrial wire. Galvanized steel, copper, brass, materials you would find in a hardware store, not a sculptor's studio filled with marble and bronze. This choice was a direct extension of her Black Mountain College training under Josef Albers, who championed the idea of to make something out of nothing. For Asawa, wire was a democratic material. It was humble, accessible, and unpretentious. But in her hands, this rigid industrial line became something else entirely. It became fluid, organic, and alive. Her primary technique, the one that would become her signature, was a form of looping or single-stitch crocheting she learned in Mexico. It's a process that is both incredibly simple and maddeningly complex. Imagine taking a single, continuous strand of wire and, using only your hands and a simple dowel, meticulously looping it back on itself, row after row after row, to build a three-dimensional form. It's a slow, repetitive, and physically demanding process. Her fingers, calloused and strong, worked for hours on end, weaving these metallic webs into existence. This process was fundamental to the meaning of the work. It was a meditative act, a performance of patience and endurance that embedded her own time and labor directly into the object. Unlike a sculptor who carves away material to reveal a form, Asawa built her forms from the inside out, line by line. This led to her most radical conceptual breakthrough, the idea of sculpture as a drawing in space. Think about a traditional statue. It's a solid mass. It displaces space, it has a clear inside and an outside, a front and a back. Asawa's work demolishes these distinctions. Her sculptures are essentially transparent. You can see through them. They are not solid masses, but volumetric drawings, where the wire is the line and the space it encloses becomes the form. This transparency is key. It creates a dynamic relationship between the object, the viewer, and the environment. As you walk around one of her sculptures, your perception constantly shifts. The lines of the foreground and background overlap, creating mesmerizing moire patterns that seem to vibrate and shimmer. The sculptures are never static. They are in a constant state of flux, activated by the viewer's movement and the changing light. This brings us to another critical element of her work, the interplay of light and shadow. Asawa understood that the sculpture wasn't just the wire itself. It was also the shadow it cast. When lit, her works project a second, ethereal drawing onto the gallery walls. These shadows are often as intricate and beautiful as the physical object, creating a dialogue between the material and the immaterial, the real and the ephemeral. The sculpture becomes a tool for manipulating light, for drawing with darkness. This focus on transparency and line allowed her to explore one of her most famous motifs, forms within forms. Many of her most iconic works feature multiple nested lobes, like a series of Russian dolls rendered in wire. An outer form contains a smaller inner form, which in turn might contain another, even smaller one. This creates an incredible sense of internal complexity and biological mystery. They evoke natural phenomena, seed pods, cocoons, jellyfish, or cellular structures. Her inspiration was deeply rooted in the natural world she observed so closely throughout her life. She once said, "I was inspired by the beauty of a spider's web, the structure of a snail shell, the inside of a pomegranate." She saw these intricate, efficient, and beautiful forms in nature and sought to replicate their logic, not just their appearance. This is why her sculptures feel so organic. They follow a principle of growth, expanding outwards from a central point, line by line, just as a plant grows cell by cell. This deep connection to nature also informed her use of positive and negative space. In traditional sculpture, the object is the positive space, and the air around it is the negative. Asawa's work makes the negative space an active, essential component of the art. The empty volumes captured within her wire cages are just as important as the wire itself. She is sculpting air. By making her forms transparent, she forces us to see the inside and the outside simultaneously, to appreciate the shape of the void. This was a profound challenge to the Western sculptural tradition, which had been dominated for centuries by the solid, the monumental, and the opaque. Asawa offered a radical alternative, a sculpture that was light, airy, and permeable, a form that didn't dominate its environment, but rather coexisted with it, breathing with the space around it. Through her humble materials and patient technique, she didn't just create beautiful objects, she offered a new language for sculpture itself. Block 3. Asawa Art Influence. While Ruth Asawa's looped wire sculptures secured her place in art history, to see her only as a maker of objects is to miss the most profound part of her legacy. Her influence extends far beyond the gallery walls, into the realms of public art, education, and community activism. For Asawa, art was not a luxury item to be sequestered in a museum. It was a fundamental human activity, an essential part of a healthy life and a vibrant community. This philosophy was not an abstract theory, it was how she lived. After leaving Black Mountain College, she married architect Albert Lanier and settled in San Francisco, where they raised 6 children. Their home was famously chaotic, a whirlwind of creative energy where the boundaries between domestic life and artistic practice were non-existent. Her children would play amongst the hanging wire sculptures, and the dining room table doubled as a workspace. She rejected the romantic, isolating myth of the lone genius artist locked away in a studio. Instead, she modeled a life where creativity was integrated into the everyday fabric of family and community. This belief in the power of art for everyone drove her to become a tireless public advocate. She fought passionately for the importance of arts education, especially for children. Frustrated by the lack of arts programming in her own children's public school, she helped co-found the Alvarado School Arts Workshop in 1968. This was a groundbreaking initiative, born from a simple but powerful idea: bring professional artists and parents directly into schools to teach kids. It wasn't about creating professional artists. It was about fostering creativity, problem-solving, and a love for learning through hands-on experience. They used everyday, inexpensive materials, baker's clay made from flour and salt, cardboard, wire, and paint, proving that creativity wasn't dependent on expensive supplies. The Alvarado model was a massive success, eventually expanding to 50 public schools and becoming a national model for arts education, influencing policy and practice across the country. Asawa's commitment to community engagement is perhaps most visibly immortalized in her public art commissions throughout San Francisco. She didn't just install a finished piece, she often involved the community in its creation. Her most famous public work is the Andrea Fountain at Girardelli Square, completed in 1968. It's a whimsical bronze mermaid fountain, but the real magic is in the details. Asawa enlisted hundreds of people, including 200 school children, to sculpt small figures and scenes out of baker's clay, depicting life in San Francisco. These small, personal creations were then cast in bronze and welded onto the fountain, creating a rich, detailed tapestry of the city as seen through the eyes of its citizens. The fountain is not just Asawa's work. It's a collective portrait of a community, a timeless monument to collaboration. Her advocacy was instrumental in the creation of the city's first public high school for the arts, which opened in 1982. In a fitting tribute to her decades of tireless work, it was renamed the Ruth Asawa San Francisco School of the Arts in 2010. Her influence continues to resonate powerfully in contemporary art. Today, we see a renewed interest in craft, in handmade objects, and in the use of so-called low materials like textiles and wire in high art contexts, a path Asawa helped pioneer. Her integration of life and work prefigured the practices of many artists today, who blur the lines between their studio practice and their personal lives. Her focus on community-based, collaborative art projects is a direct antecedent to the social practice movement in contemporary art. But perhaps her most enduring legacy is the power of her own story. In an era where we are re-examining the canon of art history, seeking to amplify the voices of women and artists of color who were overlooked, Ruth Asawa's work feels more relevant than ever. She was a woman who faced down racial prejudice, the sexism of the art world, and the challenges of raising a large family, all while quietly creating a body of work that was utterly original and decades ahead of its time. The major retrospectives at SFMOMA and MoMA are more than just a celebration of her art, they are a correction of the historical record. They solidify her status not just as a great sculptor, but a visionary thinker, a passionate educator, and a community builder whose work reminds us that the most delicate lines can often possess the greatest strength.